And we are back. Welcome to class. I have been listening to Joe Rogan, who I haven't listened to in a very, very long time due to his unfortunate sellout. But he had Glenn Greenwald on his show yesterday, and so I like Greenwald. He's an investigative journalist with integrity. He understands the nature of power and how people use it. He's also very good at noticing what the media does and how the corporate media allies itself with what we today would call the left or liberals or progressive Democrats, whatever you want to call it. And he and Rogan were talking about free speech and the ridiculous hypocrisy surrounding I would say the throttling of the news regarding this Hunter Biden laptop scandal. And you know how social media has it's censored the information on the Hunter Biden laptop on both Twitter and Facebook. Probably other platforms as well. I suspect YouTube is playing its version of the game, as is Google. You know, the usual suspects, these massively powerful corporations who the Democratic liberal side, to use old terms, but that group seems to be completely accepting when censorship happens for news that they don't like, for news that hurts their team, or bad, unfortunate, scandalous news that hurts their candidate. So, I mean, it's just rank, idiotic hypocrisy and violates the ideas of free speech completely. And so it was interesting to watch Rogan go off on this speech, a soliloquy about how you'd think the left would know about free speech. The ACLU and other leftist organizations have a rich history of protecting free speech. He's right about that. And it's really a shame. He talks more about how it's a shame that those tenets, those ingredients of what were your strong, ironclad, honorable left in terms of free speech, that they were willing to fight for those, including fighting for speech that they didn't like, and the famous Skokie, Illinois case where the ACLU defended a Nazi march because they knew that if anyone in power started censoring free speech, eventually the censors will come for you. That power will come after you and take out your ability to say what you want to say. And so Rogan, interestingly and hypocritically enough, starts talking about free speech and how important it is and how wonderful it is. And don't they understand that eventually the power controllers and the thought controllers and the speech policers will come for them? And, you know, the whole thing is kind of ridiculous because, I'm just driving home from work, public school English teacher, and Rogan signed this massive deal with Spotify, 75 million, 100 million, whatever it was. And Spotify told him that Owen Benjamin and a few others, I think Alex Jones, there were a couple other things, but Owen Benjamin, I think, was on his show 3 or 4 times. And all of those interviews are gone. There's a list of interviews that they're censoring. And I know because, I follow Owen Benjamin on Unauthorized, that, and Instagram for that matter, that his stuff was taken off the Rogan playlist and Spotify. And in effect, the free speech thing is ridiculous. If there's free speech, Rogan had Benjamin on, 3 or 4 times. The talks are 2 to 3 hours, and Spotify said no, those can't be on there. They in effect censored the speech. And you always find people that try to defend the indefensible. Now, well, Spotify's a company and they can kind of do what they want, and you know, if you're, and maybe Owen Benjamin has changed from those days and he's now a terrible person and all these ridiculous arguments. Let me draw your attention to the fact that Rogan just said the honorable tradition of the ACLU defending a Nazi rally in Skokie, Illinois in the 1970s. This was honorable and okay and demanding of the ACLU and those who are for free speech to go to bat and defend the concept and ideas inherent in free speech. So, you know, you get people who just, they really can't think for more than 5 seconds or see any patterns or make any connections. And you get, you know, I get people who are like, well, you know, oh, Benjamin, it's hate speech, it's terrible, and, you know, Rogan was right to do this. Well, then you better tell Rogan that if he's going to censor Benjamin and Alex Jones, and there were some other people on the list, then why is he waxing poetic about how it's so honorable and beautiful that the ACLU went after those neo-Nazis, swastikas on the arm, the whole thing? Why would they, you know, he's talking about how fantastic a time in history that was when they understood that free speech was vital and important and necessary to see to it that we had a functioning republic, and that was their role. And it just, you know, I mean, Rogan gives us Shakespearean soliloquy on this and the ACLU, and he's right about that, but without even noticing, or I guess assuming nobody would notice, that he has either censored or allow Spotify to censor his material. So I don't think it'll happen, but Greenwald lets it fly on that podcast. That interview with Rogan, Greenwald does not hold back. And he goes after all the power centers and all the nerve centers and just goes berserk over corporate media, government power, all of these kinds of things. And it'll be interesting to see if they if Spotify itself, or I don't know if Rogan would do it. I think he's a puppet now, but if Spotify will pull this one, because he basically says Joe Biden is somewhat of an invalid and incapable of you know, handling the office, and he seems to have dementia, which is true, and that the Democratic Party said that about Joe Biden before he became the favorite and before COVID hit and all of that kind of stuff, and they weren't pushing him. They were actually, as a matter of fact, Cory Booker and others were talking about how Biden was unfit. This is the DNC and the Democrats, and then COVID hits and Biden's the most recognizable name, so they went that way. So Greenwald points out all of these uncomfortable truths and goes after all of the power centers you can possibly think of. He calls them names. He uses profanity. It's really a tour de force. Greenwald is great and is an interesting guy and someone to follow. Rogan, you know, I'm driving home from work and he's talking about free speech. And I'm thinking the thing with Spotify, and, you know, you take Owen Benjamin off, who's never even gotten a speeding ticket, and talks about how giving young children hormones is child abuse. That was pretty much Owen Benjamin's sin on Twitter, which got him booted off of all the other stuff. So just wanted to point that out. This is the kind of thing we talk about in class all the time. Making connections, how people are hypocritical, the sad and pathetic affair that is the Democratic liberal side of this fake two-sided debate. It's probably another reason why Biden's going to get destroyed in the election less than a week from now. And they're going to drag it out and play games. They're already telegraphing that on Instagram and other places, how it's normal that votes are going to be voted past the time. And this, I'll leave you with this, because it's one of the things that you need to notice. Especially as a young person. It may seem natural, and it may seem that the words ring true because you're so young. And this isn't really related to what I was just talking about, but I opened up Instagram today, And it talked about, they have these voting messages now. So it's voting, make sure you vote, and it's already seen that voting is going to take days, maybe even weeks to figure out. The voting will take days or weeks to figure out who wins the election. And it said, and this is totally normal on Instagram. That's not normal at all. It's completely abnormal that there would be anything other than the next day for the American people, citizenry, herd, to not know who the president was by the next day. So Instagram said to me today, this is totally normal, that weeks, or they're already telegraphing days or weeks, that if that happens, it's normal. That's called conditioning. That's called Pavlovian conditioning, where if Pavlov rang the bell and the dogs got food, well, every time he rang the bell, the dogs started foaming at the mouth and getting hungry and wagging their tails because they were taught to respond to that. And they're doing that to you. Instagram/Facebook is doing that to you. They are programming you so that when or if the election takes more than the next day, that's just totally normal. Let me tell you. I'm 48, and I remember every election from 1980 to 2016. And only in the 2000 election, where George W. Bush had a stronger, more corrupt political machine and was able to take the election from Al Gore. I voted for Gore, so I took the L that year. That is the only time there's been any kind of oddity with the election. Even 2016, when Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. By the next day, we knew. That was it. It was over. So they're playing with you. They're conditioning you to think that things that are abnormal and not acceptable are normal and acceptable. That's all they're doing. They're telling you through, they probably have it on Facebook, they probably got stuff on Twitter, where anyone who tells you that this is totally normal is basically, actually let me not say basically, anyone who says that to you is lying to your face. So Instagram, in doing this, is lying to you and playing with your head. And that's why you're here. So you don't get your head played with, your brain melted, and you can see things for what they are and not get confused by the idiotic corporate media, corporate social media babble. Okay, that's it for today. Welcome back to class if you've missed some, and I'll talk to you next time.